I'm Zoe, and today we're going to make the Bradley Benn beer bread. It's 100% whole grain from Healthy Bread in 5 minutes a day, and it's a beer dough that has a really wonderful tang to it. And then we roll into that sauteed onions, rosemary, and walnuts. The whole combination is absolutely delicious. So we're going to get started by actually preparing our pan. I have an 8.5 by 4.5 inch non-stick pan, and then I'm going to generously grease that with butter. The butter will actually impart some flavor to it. Now, having said that, you can of course do this with oil or even like a spray like Pam. But you just want to make sure you get a really nice coat on there so that once your bread is done, it will just flip right out. And now we're ready to roll out our dough. I have my dough rolled out to about 1/4 inch thick, and I just want to make sure that I have enough flour under there because it's been sitting here for a second, so I want to make sure that it's not sticking. And if it does, just use your bench scraper and go right under that, just pushing some of that flour that's around the edge under the dough, and that way it will move around freely. My sauteed onions to that dough, and it should go to about 1/2 inch from the edge so that you can roll this up and then sort of stick those edges together. So you don't, in other words, you don't want the onion all the way out to the bitter edge of this. Sometimes your fingers are just the best tool. Walnuts is what the recipe calls for, but I have pecans, and so we're going to make do with that. And it's going to be just as tasty. And then starting at the long end, I'm just going to roll this up into a log. If your dough sticks to your surface, just use your bench knife or bench scraper, and it will get it dislodged just like this. A little flour under there. And then we're just going to pinch that seam together. You can either bake it as a free-form loaf, so essentially just as a long log like this, or you could put this into a loaf pan and bake this as a loaf. The seam side is up, and then I'm going to fold this over itself in thirds, so just like this. And that way I have onion going throughout the bread all the way through. And then I'm just going to place it right into a bread pan, and then I'm going to loosely cover that with some plastic wrap and let it rest, and then we'll come back and 90 minutes has gone by, and our dough is done resting. And as you can see, it hasn't risen all that much, but this is completely normal for our dough. I'm just going to brush this with a bit of water with a pastry brush, and then I'm going to sprinkle it with some coarse salt and some chopped up rosemary. I'm just going to pat it down a little bit so it doesn't pop off. You can actually leave the loaf just like this, but I'm going to give it a little bit of a slash on the top so that it will open up really nicely. If you don't do the slashing, it will rise up and it may just sort of crack open any old way that it wants to. Our oven is preheated, our bread is all ready to go in, and on this loaf I want a really nice crusty, crispy top. So I'm actually going to add some water and steam to the oven. Place our loaf right in the oven, and then I'm going to add my steam to the pan down here. And then quickly shut the door, and we'll check back with this in about 35 minutes and see how it's going. It turns out that the bread needed to bake for 45 minutes instead of 35, so I added 10 more minutes, and I think it's done now. So let's go in and check it out. Looks great. Look at the color, it's beautiful. It has a crispy crust, and now let's go get it out of this pan. Probably with all that butter and the non-stick, yep, it'll just slip right out. My bread is finished. It smells absolutely divine in here. The rosemary and the onions, it's just exquisite. I wish I could cut into it now, but I have to dash off to my son's soccer game. And that actually will give me just enough time to let this cool off. If you cut into a hot loaf of bread, it's probably going to be a little gummy. So we recommend letting it cool off completely, but nobody can actually resist warm bread. After the game, I'll cut into it and we'll take a look at the inside.